so many women struggle with perfectionism and people pleasing. And I know it's been an obstacle for me. It's been an obstacle for you
Yeah.
in your life. And so many people, I think, connect with you through really watching you overcome it, cheering you on through
Mhm,
it. Can you
mhm,
talk about your journey? Because so many people right now listening to us are struggling with
mhm.
perfectionism, with people pleasing.
Yeah.
Yeah. How have you gone through that, navigated it, overcome it, all that?
Yes, yes. I love it that you started with that because of all of the things that happened to me in my life, overcoming that is really one of the biggest obstacles that I had to overcome to get to where I am today.
Mm,
Because perfectionism is like, it's like a drug. I was addicted to it. And you
mm,
said it in my intro, born the oldest of all these cousins, the oldest of all of my siblings. I was destined, I think, to be a perfectionist
mm,
because I thought, I'm here. I'm the example. I'm the oldest. I had this amazing family that I wanted to set a good example for and be all that I could be. I was born, I was a singer and I had this talent as a young girl and I was on stages, immediately as a 6-year-old. And I was really primed to be a perfectionist. And Jamie, it wasn't crippling to me until later in life. I did the Miss Kentucky pageant and the Miss America pageant. And I think
mm,
pageants really multiply perfectionism because you are literally standing on a stage and they are judging the way that you look and speak
mhm.
and walk and sing and are. And we signed up for that, which is it just makes anyone that is a perfectionist, it makes them lean into that 10 times more, I think. But when I really feel like I overcame it was when I went through my crisis point in my life and my low. And it's something that I shared in my book that took me a really long time to share because I was a perfectionist, because that part of my story I'd kept quiet for so long. And so I'd gone from this, little country girl with big dreams, achieving my dreams, some really big stages and achieving all that I could as a young person, setting this great example for my family, achieving Miss Kentucky, going to Miss America, being a runner up at Miss America, doing the amazing race with my dad 3 times. And I'd achieved all these dreams as a young 20 something year old. And I started to crumble under the weight of that because I just felt like, as a perfectionist, I had to be this certain type of person and I had to outdo like everything that I'd done in my life, or else people were going to be disappointed in me.
Mm,
And I was disappointed in myself. And I had this point in my life where I started to have dependence on prescription medication that a doctor had started to prescribe me so that I could kind of keep going at this pace, this furious pace of life, keep achieving and doing more. And it crippled me and it became something that I almost lost my life to. And I ended up in a treatment center for 6 months of my life, after I just walked off the Miss America stage, doing all of these wonderful things. And if you had told me when I was standing on that stage as this shiniest version of myself, that was where I would end up in a few years, I would have said there's no way, there's no path to that. But perfectionism is certainly a path to that. And it's something that I couldn't outrun, I couldn't keep up with. And it held me back in so many aspects of my life. It kept me in a cage.
mm,
Um, and what I experienced in going through treatment, because it's never the drugs and alcohol, and treatment, it's always what's underneath that got you there in the first place. And when we started digging up all of that, like, why do you feel like this? And why do you feel like you have to be this version of yourself? And what if you showed up as your real, authentic, true self? What would that look like and feel like and be like? And I emerged 6 months later as the most pure, authentic, non perfectionistic version of myself. And that's when living fully, which is my whole message, it's what my book is called and my podcast is called, and everything that I talk about, just like you talk about worthiness and believing in yourself. I talk about living fully and to live the fullest life. I could no longer live as a perfectionist.
mm.
Um, because you hold yourself back from so much when you live like that. And so, how I overcame it is maybe different than a lot of people. You may not have to go through an addiction or a crisis, but like it's making a decision it's the realization that like people don't even love the perfect version of you more than they would love the authentic version of you.
Isn't that true?
I learned that after showing up as the authentic version of myself. Your moment was taking that. That's the first time that I saw Jamie was taking that makeup off on QVC and like
Mm.
showing your skin. I can still remember the reaction that I had to that. Um, and I saw as a person online when I started showing up truly authentically, talking about the good stuff and talking about the bad stuff, showing up with no makeup and my hair wasn't brushed yet, and talking about the things that I struggled with and the non-perfect parts of myself. That's when people liked me more.
Yeah. This is really, really big what you just said, because it's so easy to believe the lie, oh, I've got to be perfect to be loved.
Yeah.
And for a lot of us, I've got to be perfect to love myself.
To love myself.
Right. And,
Yeah.
and in both cases, you're actually, when you talk about living fully, you're actually living a lot less fully when you're trying to be
Yeah.
perfect, because you're not being all of who you are and who you truly are. And you experience this like firsthand. How in that 6 months in treatment, how did you get to the point where you did the work on perfectionism, and what are some of the things that you kind of maybe either had to learn or unlearn, I guess, in that journey?
Yeah, that's a great question because so when I first went to treatment, I was still like so delusional that there was an issue at all
Mm.
that I thought when I showed up that day, and luckily, like my parents were the one that kind of were the ones that facilitated, like, there is an issue here. We don't know because we've never experienced addiction as a family. So they were Googling and asking and trying to figure out. And we were kind of like throwing a Hail Mary of like, is this the issue? Like, what is the problem? Because it just looked so different from me. I wasn't out on the street doing drugs. These were prescription medications that were being prescribed to me that I had become dependent on and was taking them in a way that was not prescribed. But I was still so delusional when I showed up because I felt like I still had everything together in my life, even though I really didn't, because it kind of looked that way on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, I'll show up to this place and they're going to turn me away and be like, well, she doesn't need to be here. Not only did they very quickly realize I need to be there, but I did my 30 days there because most people, they'll do 30 days of treatment. And at the end of 30 days, you've gone through with withdrawals and all the things that you need to go through, that your body needs to go through. And I thought after 30 days, I would be pretty good to go and they would send me home. And I thought, as the still perfectionist that I was like, well, great, this will give me a little bit of street cred and I can write a book about it one day. And like, this is going to be great, for the future of me. It's okay. What this blip on the radar. And my parents came in and we sat down with my counselor and they said, we don't feel like you're finished with the work here. We are recommending extended care for you, which was 3 months that they wanted me to stay there longer. And I was floored by that because I had seen people that had come in that were literally on the streets using heroin and things that I thought in my perfectionistic mind were worse than what I was doing. I was comparing myself to other people and being like, well, they're certainly going to let me out. Like, they're not even keeping these people.
Mm.
And they kept me the longest. And it was in that 3 months that turned into almost 5 months that I did the work on uncovering what was underneath and why I'd become the person that I'd become and why I was using these things like I was using. And, they did something really crazy kind of with me. They're very individualistic at the place that I went in their approach to how they help people overcome their addictions and the things that they need to overcome that was underneath their addictions. And something that they did with me, I clearly, coming from pageants and caring a lot about my appearance and what I looked like, I had these long blonde hair extensions like my whole life. I'd never gone a day without hair extensions and full makeup. And I remember I'd been in extended care for a few weeks and they said, well, you're doing really well. So we're going to let you have a hair appointment because I have dark hair naturally and my dark roots were growing out and all these extensions were starting to fall. I was literally physically starting to fall apart. And I was like, oh, amazing. Awesome. So, I did all my thing, filled out all my forms, and this big van, white van pulls up with our treatment facility name on the side, and they drive me to the hair salon. And I opened my book with this story because it was very transformative in the work that I did there. And this story may sound kind of silly to people, but it was one of the most life-shifting things that's ever happened to me in my life. And what happened was I walked into this hair salon, and they were going to take my hair extensions out because they were halfway falling out. And, for 10 years, I'd never had them out of my head. And I don't think I really thought about that. And so they took all these extensions out of my hair, and I was faced backwards, so I wasn't faced towards the mirror. So they did that first before they were getting ready to color my hair. And I can still remember there was a silver tray next to me. And I can remember seeing her take these permanent extensions out of my hair and putting them on this silver tray beside me. And when she turned my chair around and I looked in the mirror, I had an out of body experience, and my life like flashed before my eyes.
Really?
It was very bizarre. And I was so emotional and so, about my hair, that my hair was out. My hair was like 2 inches long underneath that. It was all different colors because I had 2 inches of dark roots, and I had just never seen myself like that. And I think also just everything that I'd gone through, I was a different version of the person that I'd expected to become. And it was so emotional and so visceral, this reaction that I had. And then she went on to say, okay, now we're going to color your roots. And I was already having this moment. I was like, okay. So she colored my hair, and it ended up not going well. And so it was like orange and white stripes, and it was 2 inches long, and then she had to cut it. And I got back in the white van, and they drove me back to the treatment center, and I walked straight into my counselor. And I said, I know you guys think you know what you're doing with me and with my case. And I know you guys think you know what you're doing with me, but you don't, because now I feel worthless. I've never felt the way that I've felt about myself. Now I want to go out on the streets and do the hard drugs. I don't even want to live anymore because I felt so terrible about myself. And I was like, I want to go home. And I almost left treatment that day because it was I'd never felt so worthless in my life over them taking out my hair extensions.
Is that because you attached worthiness to appearance?
100%.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first part of my shell that they were cracking.
Mm.
And I didn't even realize, Jamie, that I was so attached to my appearance, because I'd never been attached to my appearance growing up. I was never the prettiest one in the room. I always had a talent, and that's always kind of what I stood on. And pageants and things around my looks was never even anything that was in my future. I really wanted to be a representative for my state, and I knew talent was 35% of the score at Miss America. I mean, I'm 5 feet tall. I didn't ever think I was going to do a pageant. But I think that something changed in me that year when they started talking about, because it's essentially what our parents called them is beauty queens. We were beauty queens. And I think that I had started to really become attached to my appearance and to the person that I was. And that was the first real tick away at that. And it was when I tell you, my whole body felt something. And I'd never felt that worthless. Mm. And I think I share this story and I was afraid to open my book with this because I was like, I don't want women reading this and be like, oh, really? I can't connect with you. You had that moment over your hair extensions. I've gone through actual trauma. That was actually that big of a low point for me. And I think that so many women attach our self-worth to our appearance. And as we start to age, and as we can't really control what we look like, and we start looking different, and I think people don't know what's happening to them. And I didn't know that I was becoming that attached to that until they took that away from me. And that was the first thing that they did for me. I say for me now, but back then, I thought it was the worst thing that they did to me back when in treatment. But it was truly the thing that it revealed to me something that was really crippling me, and we started to work through it. And then it was about a month later, And, okay, I've gotten used to the hair extensions being out. Now I'm not as attached to my appearance, but I was still singing at this little chapel that we had where everybody's families would kind of come. And it was just this moment where I could set myself apart from people because I still was able to show my talent
Mm-hmm.
and be like, okay, yes, here I am in rehab and here I am looking like this, different than I've ever looked before. And I also gained 30 pounds in treatment. So I felt overweight and like all of these things. And I'd kind of become okay with that. And they said to me again, they said, you're going to take a break from singing and chapel. And that was really another shift for me because then I had nothing.
Mm.
I felt so average and like everyone else. And like I looked different and I was different. And I was like, now you're going to tell me I can't talk about being anything that I'd done, Miss Kentucky or Miss America or The Amazing Race. You know what's funny too is my third season of Amazing Race was airing while I was in treatment.
Mm.
And they let us watch TV on Sunday nights and they would turn on TV and like there I was. And they would like turn it off or they would turn the channel because they didn't want me to talk about, they wouldn't let me cling to that old
Mm-hmm.
self because
Mm-hmm.
they were doing so much work of stripping that away
Mm-hmm.
and showing me what was underneath it and making me okay with what was underneath it. And when they
Like
told
you are
me,
not your achievements, you are
no,
not your appearance, you are not
Mhm.
your, do I have something different than everyone else?
Yeah,
But like, how do you believe you are enough exactly as you are
yeah,
without these other things?
because I had the self-confidence. I believed that I was enough, even going through what I was going through in treatment, when I could still say to people, but I did this
Mm.
and listen to me sing.
Mhm.
And, it was the last little shred of my old self and my shiny shield that I was holding out to other people. And they really knew what they were doing with me because that's when I really did the real work because I had nothing left.
Mm.
And I just
Mhm.
felt what I think a lot of women feel their whole lives for the first time. I felt that. And I didn't want to live like that. And they taught me in 3 months of work that I did. I loved the person underneath that without all of those things more than I loved the person that I went into treatment as, with all of
Mm.
those accolades and achievements and achieving all of those dreams. I walked out of there, 35 pounds heavier with 2-inch long hair, not talking about any of the stuff that I'd done, not singing in the chapel, and I loved that. That was the closest to the person that I want to be than I've ever been in my life. Was without all of those things.
This is huge. I think so many of us and so many people listening um, think that to be enough, they need their career. But who are you without your career? Or they need to be so and so's mom, or
Yes.
this accomplishment, or this thing, or this contribution. There are people that think I have to give and give and give and people please and give and serve, and that's beautiful. And also, who are you without all that?
Yeah.
And just to kind of, hopefully for this to hit home for everyone listening, because you're talking about almost learning to feel more fulfilled, learning to not wrap your identity in any of those
Mhm.
things, whether it's your accomplishment or what you're known for, or
Yeah.
needing to stand out and be different from others, or needing to look a certain way. Um, and that when everything was stripped away and you literally were at your lowest point, then learning to love yourself innately for the innate,
Yes.
beautiful soul that you are,
Mhm.
is how you actually then started to become your most fulfilled.
Yes, it is. And
Mm.
you know what was really hard about it, and that why I think I lived that way for so long. It's really hard when the thing that you're attached to is seen as a positive thing,
Right,
a
of course.
talent, or being Miss Kentucky and representing my state.
Because we're in a world where everyone believes the same thing about themselves, that
Yes.
if they can only achieve that, or look a certain way, then they'll finally be enough, then they'll finally be
Mhm.
happy. So everyone's believing the same lie. So then
Yeah.
they're congratulating you
Yeah.
for getting closer to that
Yeah.
lie. Yeah, and we're in this kind of like whole thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's why for decades of my life I thought, "Oh, if I achieve enough, then I'll feel enough. If I please enough other
Yes.
people, then I'll finally feel enough." And I lost decades of my life just achieving,
Mhm.
achieving, or trying to make everyone else happy. And no matter how many people I made happy, I still felt like something's missing,
Mhm.
like I'm not enough. And it's this, and then I thought, well, I just need to achieve more. I need to just make more people happy.
And you
And
just
it's this,
never felt you just
you never
yeah.
perpetual cycle to
It
nowhere.
is. It is
Hmm.
a perpetual cycle to nowhere. I love
Yes.
that. And
Yes.
I can even remember, Jamie, like when even after when you're Miss Kentucky, you walk into the room and you got a crown and banner on. You don't even have to like. That's the worst thing for a perfectionist because it's like, oh, you don't know who I am. Here you go, right here on the banner.
Hmm.
Like, look, here I
Yeah.
am, the queen. I used to introduce myself to people, and this is the first clue to feeling probably unworthy. I needed them to know in the first minute and a half that I had done Miss America and The Amazing Race, and I needed them to know those things because I felt like that was the reason that they would want to continue the conversation for me.
Hmm.
I didn't feel like enough, just being me and showing up, and I just had to have them know those types of things, especially as I got further and further from those things that I saw as big shiny dreams. As I stopped achieving bigger things, I just started to feel worse and worse about myself. And just, I was so disappointed in myself. And I felt like so many people were disappointed in me for not doing bigger and bigger and bigger things. So when I would be just talking to you, if you and I were in a room, I would need to tell you all of those things about myself
Hmm.
because of the lie that the world tells us. But I
Hmm.
really believed that lie.
I think this is such a big challenge for every single one of us to even today have a conversation with someone, maybe someone you don't know yet, in the coffee shop, wherever, and try to not tell them any of the things about you that
That you're
make you
proud of.
feel enough. Like, oh, my child is this, or this is my partner, or this is, and actually just try to just be you without sharing any of those things. For most of us, it's really hard,
Really, really
really
hard.
hard. And it's almost like this baby step toward worthiness, which is just like to learn to first believe that we are enough innately, because we are. We are. All those other things are like distractions that make us think we're
Yeah.
not actually, but just like try to have a conversation without saying what you do, without, and try to have a conversation with another person
Mhm.
without asking them about all the external things. And
It is
just like,
so
it's
impossibly
so
hard.
hard.
Yeah, a
Mhm.
baby step to worthiness. I love that. I did this
Yeah.
program in Nashville called Onsite. It's like a little, 3-day program. It's just like this cool, transformative, like very like cool thing where it's called what's it called?
Living
Um,
centered
Living
program.
centered. I was like
Yes.
centering something. I should have
Yes.
remembered the living word.
Yes.
And that's a big thing there. They were like, you can't say what you do.
Yes.
And it was really, really hard. And I'd already been through all of this stuff. Like, and I already kind of felt good in my skin, even without people. And it was still really hard. It was hard too not to ask other people what they did. And I'm like, why do we qualify
Yes.
each other
So
still?
on site, anyone listening or watching who hasn't heard of this, on site workshops in Nashville,
Hmm.
Tennessee. And then there's a place called in San Diego called the Oaks.
Oh, yes. And I
Um,
haven't been to the Oaks, but Bob, oh,
yes.
we love Bob.
And I did on site as well. They have so many different, they actually have treatment and recovery programs. And then they
Yes.
also have
Milestones.
like leadership development and trauma therapy.
Yes.
And I went there for a week and it was life changing. It was
It's life
marriage
changing.
changing,
Hmm.
life changing. And I remember that so well. What Mallory's talking about is you're there with 50 other people and they put you in small groups, or you could do individuals if you want, but you're not allowed to say what you do and you're not allowed to ask anyone else what you do.
Yeah.
And when I went, it was for a week. And it was the most, and it's wild how your brain starts to start guessing what someone does.
Yes.
And and to not identify with those things, it's so powerful because you can just exhale and not identify with those things. But it's also just weird not to ask
It
somebody.
feels weird.
Yeah, yeah. And then
Yeah. It's where our brain goes automatically.
yeah,
Like,
yes.
and I wish that it didn't, but it just does. It is our nature to go back to that, to go back to that, to go back because it tells you a lot about a person, but it's like, why can we not just learn the person from talking to
Mhm.
the
And feel
person?
enough as who we are just to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that is is really powerful, that you didn't like necessarily know you wanted to or needed to do that work, but what a gift that that happened in treatment.
They knew they really knew what they were doing with my case,
Yeah.
because the perfectionism almost killed me more than the addiction
And you know
did.
what's wild? I always believe in full circle moments. I always believe our steps are ordered. Like when I waitressed at Denny's and
Mhm.
the kitchen was a disaster, they could not get pancakes out on time. Customers would leave. I'd get no tip. There were so many things that happened, and I loved waitressing. But I learned this lesson that many years later, when I launched a company, I'm like, we've got to get the operations right. If
Yeah.
the operations aren't right, nothing else matter. And I just like, I can look back at these different experiences, and I'm just thinking of you in your life right now and how you impact millions, millions of women, literally, and people, but millions of women turn to you every day for friendship, for hope, for inspiration. They support your businesses. And I think one of the biggest reasons, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, if you agree with this or not, but one of the biggest reasons, not just that your products are phenomenal, which you know I love them, but that you fully show up, the the good parts, the bad parts, the messy parts, the
Mhm.
really, really real parts, and people connect with you for
Mhm.
that. And I just wonder, had you not gone through one of the hardest things of your life, addiction and being in recovery for 6 months and actually being stripped down to learning to love yourself for who
Mhm.
you are, could you be showing up as actually who you are today, having all this success?
A 0% chance.
Mm,
Number one, I wouldn't be alive today.
mm.
That's how low of a point I was at and how bad it was for me. I do not think I would have lived another 8 weeks. I really don't. So like I think it
Wow.
really saved my life,
Really?
but
Had you
then it
not entered
changed
treatment, you don't
100%.
think you would have lived another
No.
8 weeks?
Uh-uh. I was that close to, like, my body was shutting down. And I
Wow.
it ch- it saved my life, which recovery saves people's life first, but then it changes people's lives, and then it gives them a whole new life. And that, if you had asked me before 2014, when I walked into that treatment center, what's the best thing that ever happened to you in your life? And I would talk to you about being on the Miss America stage, and I would talk to you about like the moment that I was crowned Miss Kentucky. I wanted to win so bad. And the moment they put that crown on my head, it changed my whole life. That was my moment. That was my like taking your makeup off on QVC finally moment. That was when they placed that crown on my head, changed my whole life. I said on my last day of treatment, you stand up and you say something. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. That was the best thing that ever happened to me in my life, was going to a treatment center. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I always thought it would be a part of my story that I was embarrassed about and that I wouldn't share, and that I would just like let stay in the shadows. I would be thankful for it because it saved my life. But like I wouldn't really talk about it. I would just keep moving forward in this great life that I have. Really grateful that I'd been blessed enough to have my life saved. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was,
Mm.
and I thought it would be the worst thing that ever happened to me. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And whenever people come to Instagram or YouTube or a podcast and they see me, or the Jamie Kern Lima Worthy event in my feather blazer, and when they see me showing up joy filled and happy with 3 kids, and you see my peony garden in the backyard, and you see the sweatshirts and the pajamas, I want them to remember that I spent 6 months in a treatment center. Because I think that when we think of people that have stories that have a dark part, or like, well, she was addicted to drugs at one point in time, I think that it's a kink in the armor. And I want you to I want you to remember that this is the face of addiction. That this is my office, and I got 6 amazing girls that work for me, and my businesses do millions of dollars in revenue. And this is my husband, and these are my kids, and this is what my home looks like. But I also want you to look at my face and remember that, like, this is the face of addiction. It's not someone that's on the streets with needles laying there, that's a homeless person. It's not somebody that's strung out, that like you're saying, oh, poor, pitiful them. It's me. It's me too, sitting by this beautiful peony arrangement with my face on a book. Um, that is a powerful part of my story, because I think that people count themselves out of their dreams because of things that like they went through in their past. And I want you to not be embarrassed about the things that you went through, especially those things that are dark and a little seedy and feel a little sketchy to you and that you don't want to say at the PTA meeting. I want to keep reminding people that that's part of my story, because I still feel worthy of the things that I have today, even though like I went to rehab after I wore the Miss Kentucky crown.
What do you say to the person listening right now who knows it's them right now and no one else in their life does?
I was that person. I was very isolated, and oftentimes at the end of addiction, and your addiction piece can be something different. It can be a mental health challenge, like maybe you're dealing with like severe depression, or maybe you are in a relationship that's really bad that you know you need to be out of. Maybe you're in like a dead end career and you just feel like hopeless about your life. And if you if you're at that point in your life, I want to say, this is going to be a really weird thing for me to say, especially to that person in this state, but I want to say it because I believe it. Get excited, because rock bottom is the best place to build the most incredible life. And if you can walk out of this, and if you can get through this thing, you will have 1,000,000 times better of a life than you did before you went through this thing. These things, these terrible, terrible things that happen to us in our lives, usher us into the greatest life than you can ever imagine. And I think, Jamie, you cannot access the incredible life that like I feel like I'm leading right now, this incredible life. I couldn't have accessed that had I not gone through that. So if you're a person that nobody knows what you're going through right now, and you're sitting there and you're thinking, I feel totally hopeless, I hate my life. Maybe you're like I was. I'm not going to live another 6 weeks. I will physically die. If you can have the strength and the courage to make it through this and walk through this, you can access the most incredible life that you cannot imagine, the life that you can access. Mm. But you oftentimes have to be the person. I was very lucky to have my parents and people on the outside see that there was something wrong and they stepped in. But sometimes, Jamie, people don't have that person. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people have to be the person that chooses to walk into this fire. Mm-hmm. And it is the most daunting thing ever to think about walking into a treatment center or approaching a person about help, because there is a hard part that you have to walk through to access that beautiful life on the other side. But my Lord, if I can just scream one thing from the rooftops till the end of my life, it would be, in a way, like you are the lucky one. Because if you have that sort of low, you can have this sort of life on the other side. And it's only accessible through going through the blazing fire that is walking through addiction, or walking through leaving an abusive relationship, or walking through a really scary career change or a complete reinvention. What you get on the other side is so amazing. So I would say to that person, like, remember what's on the other side. Don't just think about the pain and the hard stuff and the embarrassment and all that stuff, because that's all going to be in the middle. But I want you to think of the other side, because it is so awesome. Mm-hmm. It is so awesome, and it is the reality. If you walk into any AA meeting, if you talk to anybody, like, look at all the people that we look up to and that you've already had on the Jamie Kern Lima show. Look, the Oprahs and the Ed Miletts and the Robin Roberts. Every single one of them has a story of walking through the fire. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Every single one of them.
I think when we're in it, so many people, first of all, there's so many different types of addiction. I think if you're, in a situation where you're privileged enough to be able to find treatment and enter it, even then, so many people feel so much shame around it. They want to hide. Yeah. They don't want anyone to know they're addicted. They worry about that. And I know you being the oldest of 23 cousins, having all these external accomplishments, having a family that, is so legacy focused and proud and all of these things, and you dealing with perfectionism. What would you say just to the person? I think, Mallory, where you're at now, to kind of show that, like, part of what you're saying is that, yeah, you might go through embarrassment. Yeah, you might feel shame right now. Yeah, you might be hiding it. but would you say your deepest sense of connection and respect from others and joy and all the most beautiful things uh, awaits you on the other side?
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad that you said that. Yeah, yes, that is a fact. That is a fact that we talk about that people love you the most for your authentic self and all of these things over and over. But I want to tell you the story of how I told my family essentially and
Mm,
what I was met with. So, okay, we grew up on this farm. So my grandparents are in the middle and we're all surrounding them on this big, beautiful piece of property. My whole life, I was an example to these people. And I was the
yeah.
singer
I was
and I
going to
was
say,
the
you're the
this.
hero.
I
You're
was
the
the
one everyone
hero.
says, that's our
Yes.
Mallory.
That was, yes,
Yes.
they were proud of me and I was a good
Yes.
example in every single category, Jamie. You want to talk about academics? I was valedictorian in my class. You want to talk about singing? I was on every single stage in our hometown and then like national. They were just so proud. They were just so
You
proud of
got
me.
people coming up to you. You're a role model for our
Yes.
kids.
They said
Yes.
the night of Miss America, you could walk out on your back porch. It's a farming community. And that it's a live show, and obviously you see the contestant going from the next level to the next level. They said that you could hear from across the cornfields, you could hear people screaming and cheering. And like that, my whole town supported me, not just my family. But my family, I have an incredible, amazing family that has always been very legacy focused. Why are you here and what are we doing in the world? And we can change the world. And we did this thing where we would come together once a year. We would come together quarterly and like have meetings and stuff, but once a year, and we would come. And even though we lived on the same farm, we would go on this like trip together and we would all go to this place and we would stay and we would play the same slideshow of my grandparents, like our family story and our legacy, what we stand for, and how many times my grandpa's like entrepreneurial endeavors failed. And like we all knew this story, but we would retell it and we would come together and we would talk about like who we wanted to be in the world and what we were doing in our lives. And we were kids. I was the oldest, and they started this when I was in college. But some of my cousins were 5 years old and they're talking about legacy and like how do you want to show up in the world? And like that's what kind of family I came from. And yeah, we'd heard the stories about my grandpa's failures in the entrepreneurial business, but he always succeeded and like he always made it through and he never had to declare bankruptcy. And it was always like, here's our pain point in our family, but like here we are overcoming. So when I went to treatment, I was very isolated from my family when things were getting really bad. So I don't think people knew how bad it was getting
Mhm.
for me. And so I went to this program. And I was about 4 months into the program or 5 months into the program when our annual family legacy thing trip
Mm.
was. And it was this little, like these sets of cabins called Evans Mill. It's in Tennessee. And we would all come together in this great room and we would have different segments where we were talking about different things. And they had decided that what I was going to do, and my counselors and everything at treatment were like, this is going to be really good for you. You should stand up and you should talk about what you're going through to your family. And like my family knew that I was in a program, and but I had literally never shared a failure, or
Mm.
I don't think anyone in our family had ever shared a failure while they were in it, where it wasn't like and this is what happened from it, and this is on the other side. So I had to stand in front of my family and all my cousins, all my aunts and uncles, our advisors, and like all the people that I loved that loved me, and I had to tell them what I was going through and what I was learning in treatment about myself and how I'd gotten there. And I was so nervous to stand up there, and it was the first time I'd ever shared any story of failure in front of the people that like I loved so much. And I was so afraid that not that they would be disappointed in me, because I knew the kind of family that I was from, and I knew that they would support me in whatever I had to go through because we loved each other deeply. But I did feel like, they wouldn't see me as the same, that it would kind of like erase all the things that I'd done in my past and that they'd see me like a little bit different. So I stood up there and I shared everything and nobody really said anything. And at the end of it, they clapped for me, and they were all clapping and saying like, we're so proud of you.
Mm.
And I remember my uncle being like, Mal, we're so proud of you. They're all wrestling coaches, and it was like they were cheering me on. we're so proud of you, and how can we support you as a family? And what can we do better to make it easier on you? And they loved me, and I was on an even higher pedestal to them.
Wow.
And it was one of those moments that I'll never forget. You always hope that the people around you will accept you for who you are and the things that you go through in life. But so often, Jamie, people love you 10 times more for those things, those failures and those dark things and those, the things that are just so tough to bring to the surface. They loved me even more for it. And there have been so many times in my family that we've dealt with hard things since I went through that over 10 years ago. And they come straight to me, and they're like, hey, Mal, this is going on. And, now I'm the person that can help other people. And I don't know why it's human nature to believe that those things will make people see us in a worse light, in a different light, certainly. And it still is a different light. Because so many times it's proven over and over that people love you so much more for showing up as you are with all of those things in tow, on display. And I'm so happy that what happened to me, because I don't know that I ever would have learned that lesson. Because it's a lesson that I had to be pushed into. I really admire people who can just own it and show up and be like, I'm going to take this chance and show my real colors. Because I had to be pushed into it, because I was really in deep with needing to remain the person that I thought I needed to be for everyone else. And I'm really glad that I hit that rock bottom, and I was forced to, through this recovery program, figure out this truth, because it is the truth. It is the truth.
And everything in your life right now proves that.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of times
does.
when we have different types of struggles or different types of addiction, and we might solve it in one area, it pops up in another area.
Oh yeah, whack-a-mole. That's
You
what they call
see
it.
people that, maybe have food addiction, and they do something about that, or, but then all of a sudden, or they find a solution to that. Now all of a sudden they're gambling, or they're shopping, or
Yes.
have you seen when you went through recovery, has any type of like addictive tendencies popped up in other areas of your life and your journey?
Oh yeah, 100%. I struggle still probably today with workaholism. And I think that, like we just said in the beginning of this podcast, it's so hard because the brands that I'm building are it's a motivational, true, like helping women brand, or it's these amazing sweatshirts, or it's these pajamas that I'm so proud of. And it's all like really good stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that I can get addicted to that, just like I was addicted to drugs and alcohol. Just like before that, I was addicted to achievement. Just like before that, I was addicted to being a role model and example to my cousins. I certainly think that cross addictions are a real thing. And I think that at the root of all that, it is just accepting ourselves for who we are and where we are. And I think as a person that has an addictive personality too, I'm always looking for that hit somewhere. And sometimes when I achieve something in my work, or something really works out, it can feel the same in my brain. So I think that I know that going through what I went through in recovery, I learned a lot. So I notice now when those things are happening when I was unaware before, and I can do something about it. But I also think that life is a constant. We need to be looking at our lives at all times and being like, what are the things that I need to change? Because it's not just okay, I went to treatment, now I'm good for the rest of my life, or I worked out one time and now I'm fit. It is a constant, that's what living fully, I think, is. It is constantly choosing to, no, I want to live. I don't want to live here. I want to live here. No, I don't want to. I can do this better. I can be a better parent, or be a better person in my business. I can be a better boss. I can be a healthier person. I can do that thing less. It's a constant reawareness. And yes, cross addictions are real things. I was actually in treatment with a lady who had been sober for like 20 or 30 years, and she was there for a shopping addiction,
Mhm,
and she was
mhm,
sober from drugs and alcohol still.
mhm.
And it was a really fascinating thing to see. And I really appreciated her sharing her story, because it made me aware that, like, when you let go of one thing, it's like you want to grab onto something else. And uh, yeah, I think it's a natural tendency of the human being for sure.
Mallory Ervin is a small town girl turned internet and entrepreneurial superstar. She's a best-selling author, an online mega influencer. She's also the founder of Living Fully Co.